Shall we move onwards then to 800 bullets?
Yes, let's.
Seems like a lot of bullets.
It is a lot of bullets. It is 800 of them.
Almost literally.
In fact, entirely literally. But we'll come to that. 800 balas, or 800 bullets, stars Sancho Gracia as Julian, a stuntman and stunt coordinator who worked during the glory days of the Spanish-shot spaghetti westerns, and who now replays his glory days in the western-themed tourist attraction of Texas Hollywood in Almeria. A real place, as it happens. I was surprised to find. Entertaining handfuls of tourists with scenes of cowboys and Indians and, well, less than gracious tours of the Museum of the West. From this and his cut of a cannabis business run out of the town, he scrapes a meagre living, enough to keep him in alcohol and, occasionally, ladies of negotiable virtue, which will suffice for him. Certainly, it's enough to quieten his demons, the loudest of which is the death of his son, also a stuntman, whose death in a stunt gone wrong, and a genuinely wince-inducing stunt at that, opens the film. These demons, and the well-suppressed basic humanity, threaten to be woken up fully by an unexpected arrival. His grandson, Carlos, Luis Castro, a little brat of a child who has run away from a school trip. Carlos is a spoiled little rich kid whose uptight mother Laura, Carmen Maura, may pay more attention to her business, particularly Chekhov's theme park proposal, than her son, and who at the very least has no interest in talking about her late husband, Carlos's father. An unexpected discovery during a temper tantrum gives Carlos some clues as to his ancestry, and it's for that reason he skedaddles to Almeria. Here he bonds with Julian, who the film portrays as the missing and necessary macho influence in his life. Alex de la Iglesias films do seem to be marked out by the idea of women as, if not the enemy, then a controlling and emasculating force on men. And this is certainly not the only time we'll be talking about that in this episode. Julian eventually also bonds with Carlos, though in his case it's considerably more begrudgingly. The director's trademark excess is embodied in this film in a scene of wanton debauchery. Wanton debauchery, is that a tautology? I feel it might be. Where the employees of Texas Hollywood, as well as some locals, immigrant farm workers and the aforementioned ladies of negotiable virtue, go hog wild with the credit card Carlos's mum gave him for emergencies, as well as leaving the Pogues Fiesta constantly swirling around my head for the past 2 days. It also left me considering Carlos to be the world's luckiest adolescent, though feeling decidedly uncomfortable about it. The next day, a super pissed Laura arrives and, to punish Julian, fires Chekhov's theme park proposal, whereby her company buys the western town to tear it down and puts Julian and his co-workers out of a job. Julian then purchases the 800 bullets of the title and makes an armed stand against the new owners along with his colleagues. This final third really drags and sees the humour quotient substantially reduced in favour of overlong and underwhelming action scenes as the cast of Texas Hollywood fend off the police. It's this last section that lets the film down most, a film which I'd really been quite enjoying up to that point. Not that it's a section entirely without merit, there is still both humour and warmth, but the actions of the characters don't stand up to a great deal of scrutiny, and it really does outstay its welcome. For the most part, though, I enjoyed my time with 800 bullets, and much of that has to do with a great central turn from Gracia, whose charisma does a lot to make up for the fact that Julian is a stupid, selfish, and absolute tit. Necessarily, I suppose, due to its theme of machismo, the female players are underserved, particularly Terele Pavez, who plays Rocio, Julian's estranged wife, and Carlos's grandmother, which is rather a pity. 800 Bullets also works as a paean of sorts to those great films shot in Almeria, which include the Dollars trilogy, as well as historical epics like El Cid and Lawrence of Arabia. The dramatic landscape itself doing much of that work by simply existing. It's a pretty decent film all in all, but it could have done without the predictable cameo at the end, and a particularly crappy body double. I never doubted Julian's stories of the past, and never considered that the point, assuming the crux of his character to be can't let go of the past, not made the past up. Otherwise, pretty good, but could have done with about half an hour being chopped out.
Yeah, at least. Of all the films we're talking about today, this is the one I understand the least. Whether I liked or disliked other ones more or less, I could at least understand what the point of it was, what the kind of general gist of it was trying to be. 800 Bullets, I don't get. There's like, it's by Iglesias' standards quite tame for a lot of it until it suddenly isn't. And like, I can see there's a draft of this where, you know, third act aside, like, you wouldn't need to do an awful lot of workshopping, cut out a few swear words and admittedly quite a lot of hookers, and this would be a Disney film. However, the last act is so wantonly violent in places. You know, people actually die in what is a kind of light-hearted, whimsical, you know, ballad of not being able to let go of the past and, you know, old films, that kind of thing. It's not exactly a sudden change of, you know, pacing and tone, but it certainly doesn't really fit with the rest of the film, and it is, as you mentioned, way too long. Yeah, this needs a less dark final act, and that final act needs to be at least half an hour longer. This is a 90-minute film that unfortunately takes 2 hours and doesn't really have enough in the way of interest to maintain my attention. I kind of wandered more in this film than a lot of the other films we'll speak about today. I still don't dislike it. As you mentioned, a lot of quite charismatic turns, particularly from the leads, so it's easy film to watch. But ultimately, I kind of don't think it quite sticks the landing, and I'm not quite sure that it ever really knew where it was supposed to be landing in the first place. And it's just kind of flopped down at the end of 2 hours and went, well, there you go. Okay, bye. It doesn't quite give me a satisfying conclusion at the end of it. But yeah, certainly by no means unenjoyable. And I think one of the nice things about this podcast episode for me is I don't think there's anything here that I really disliked in any real sense of the word. I've got my issues with them, but there's nothing here that I actually regret watching, which is not normally the case for a lot of our podcasts.
No, I admit, because of our one previous experience, I was concerned about this, and while I certainly don't like everything here, everything is at very least interesting, which makes such a difference. You're saying about not sticking the landing. It's that final act, and again, not for the first time, not for the last time in this episode, I think, that it's unfocused. And I mean, I do see what it's about up to that point. It's focusing on Julian mostly, and it's, besides the kind of machismo, kind of vaguely misogynistic overtones the film has, and a lot of these do, which is, I feel very uncomfortable watching some of these for that. Despite women being such strong characters in so many of the films, that's weird. Anyway, it's a character study of Julian, and you know, this is a man who can't really let go of the past, but seems to know his own failings, and all that kind of introspection is quite interesting. And then you get to the last act, and had that final act been him wanting to make this final stand, and where it's shorter too, but I think that probably would have worked. But then when it just brings everybody else in as well, like, well, why are these people doing that? That makes no sense.
Any sense.
They don't even like him. And like, they all seem pretty confident about, or pretty settled on getting out of him. I mean, it wasn't a particularly great living and particularly enjoyable anyway. I mean, like, why was the man who gets hung every day joining in? It's like, what is he missing out on? So yeah, it's like the fact that other people joined in at the end, it did make a lot of sense, and it goes on for so long. And it's like the first 2 acts were sketched out reasonably well, and the third one, like, they made up on the day or days. I wonder how much of that is based on like where it comes from, because I didn't look at this earlier. I glanced at the English Wikipedia, which has nothing on it at all. But I'm looking at the Spanish page for at the moment, and it says it's based on the director's own idea and of Jorge Guerrica Echeverria, who wrote most of these with him, based in the place in Almeria where this is set, Hollywood, Texas, as it was known. It's now known as Fort Bravo. And then that's kind of like the Johnny English story, isn't it? It's like basing something on such a flimsy premise. Yeah. But it says here, the character of Julian is inspired very clearly by a series of real anecdotes from the biography of actor Aldo Sambrell. Un asiduo? No, okay, that's a word I don't know, but someone who seemed to have been in a lot of the spaghetti westerns shot in there in Almeria. So that seems to be suggesting that like there's some anecdotes of things that happened to this guy while he was filming stuff, and like, well, we'll base a film on that, and it's not the strongest basis, and I think that may explain the rather kind of unfocused nature of most of it.
Yeah.
I kind of get the feeling, and there's not a lot even in the Spanish one, there's a lot more than the English one. It seems a bit like we've got a really interesting location and some anecdotes, let's make a film. And maybe didn't take an awful lot of like preparation time in between.
Yeah.
It has that feel about it again. I mean, the character of Julian is quite strong, and Sandro Gracia's performance is really good. But it's just that final act is so messy. I just seem to have anything to say, and it feels like it was a half-baked isn't quite the right word, but it didn't really have the strongest bones.
Yeah, it seems like an ending that came about because someone thought it'd be a good ending without really having any concern about how it matched up with the rest of the character. I mean, I like what you're saying. It might have worked where it just him doing one desperate last stand, but convincing everyone else to do some weird Quixote-like last stand for no good reason and just murdering a bunch of policemen because reasons. It's a bit weak and it doesn't really fit with the rest of the film, which is you know, as I say, it does not need an awful lot of changing to be like very kid friendly. It's strange. It just tonally, this is the one thing where it's shifting about the place, and it really didn't work for me, and it just couldn't land it. It's probably my least favorite of these films, but it's still not a film that I hated while watching. So, you know, that's good.
It's definitely not my least favourite because I was enjoying the first 2/3 of it really quite a lot. Just that final third let me down. But I mean, it's just talking about the kid friendly nature of it, apart from the luckiest adolescent bit I was talking about, Scott. You're definitely not getting a Disney film, but
statutory rape.
Yes, lucky boy, but from the boy's point of view, he's probably very happy.
Right,
But that was uncomfortable. But like in that final scene too, because I realise there's this, I don't know if misogyny's the right word, but there's this thread through a lot of these films of like that women are like the enemy or something. And again, it doesn't really match up. Like there's so many strong female performances too, and Alex de la Iglesia is kind of like a protege of Pedro Almodovar, kind of like the women's director, at least as far as men go, who treats his female characters extremely well. It kind of goes contrary to that, and some of the same actors too. But yeah, in that final act, they add things in, like the ginger guy whose wife leaves him in the middle of that kind of pseudo-orgy scene with the Pogue song, which I cannot get out of my head. It's playing through my head as I'm talking. It will not leave. So she leaves on that because, well, he's a knob, isn't he? But then it stops in the middle of that final scene to send her an abusive telegram. That final act, rather than the final scene. That was weird. Why is that in there? But again, there's enough interesting in there, and it's a very striking looking film because that landscape is famous. It's passed for several different countries, and successfully so, and it's very interesting. So even when I'm not always sure like why anybody's doing any different thing, at least they're in a place that looks nice. Well, I'm not sure why they're doing it. Okay, will we move on?
I'm ready when you are.
Yeah. Oh, actually, something just occurred to me about 800 Bullets, Scott. I was going to mention this. I don't think it's anything important, but the director's a Basque, and there were a few sort of Basque references stuck into his film, and I wonder if some of them are slightly. I don't know if like they're making fun of him or Basque people or there's something else there. But in 800 Bullets, there was a character who, despite being from Andalusia, they make it very clear that he's from Andalusia. He decides that he's from Bilbao and he's an Athletic Bilbao supporter, and he's completely Basque. And they're questioning why anybody would do that. Like, why is that in this man's film?
The guy that likes jumping through windows.
Yes. And the guy that violently dies in that final act when they change, this is not a fun film anymore. That struck me. Not in any particular way. I was like, why is that? Is that a reference to something? Would that seem different in Spain? And it's not like Athletic Bilbao have ever been like well, I mean, I think they've won the league a couple of times, but they're not like they've been the top team. It's not like, say, someone from like North or Southeast England suddenly deciding they're a Manchester United supporter and kind of been ribbed for it or something like that. So
Yeah.
very curious about what that was about. But
Yeah,
yes.
no, to be honest, I didn't read anything deeper into that than a sort of general concussion-based pun.
I don't know, that actually didn't occur to me. But he's constantly throwing himself off that roof, so maybe maybe he's just very confused. Yes, though,